Hi, my name is Melissa Zavatsky, and I will be sharing Chapter 5, Essentialism. Today I'm using Nicholson's Wonder Model to explore and defend essentialism as an educational philosophy. Rather than just summarizing Chapter 5, I'm going to walk through the inquiry process and examine whether essentialism still holds up in today's educational climate. As someone working in middle school mathematics, I've seen how powerful strong foundations can be and how difficult it is when those foundations are weak. That experience has made essentialism feel less theoretical and more practical. So today, I'll argue that essentialism is not outdated, it is deeply relevant. Nicholson's Wonder Model gives us a structured way to examine philosophy in action. It moves us from abstract to practical reflection. We're going to begin with wonder, asking a meaningful what if. Then observe. We're going to talk about observations in real classrooms. Next, we'll investigate the historical and philosophical background and grounding of this philosophy. Then we'll design with intention what an essentialist classroom should look like. And we will evaluate the strengths and challenges of an essentialist classroom. And finally, we will reflect. Wonder. The guiding question here is, what if the purpose of education were to learn essential knowledge? Essentialism begins here because it's a belief that some knowledge is non-negotiable because it unlocks future learning. It's the foundation of what comes next. Teachers in essentialist classrooms are central, but it's not because they're in control. They're more of a guide into structured ways of thinking. If we observe essentialist classrooms, we're going to see thoroughly planned lessons that have a clear learning target or learning objective and success criteria that's aligned to rigorous grade level standards. Students know what they're working towards, and the instruction is very intentional. In a math classroom, one of those core subjects, this might look like teacher modeling, student practice, sometimes independent, sometimes guided, and frequent formative assessment to check for understanding. You will always see some sort of summative assessment to show mastery of standards. Historically, essentialism emerged as a response to what some educators saw as an overcorrection toward child-centered approaches. There is a concern that academic rigor was starting to decline because structure was being replaced with preference. And essentialism really asks for those to protect the integrity of the disciplines of language arts, mathematics, social studies, and science. William Bagley is an essentialist philosopher. He believed that learning requires effort, that intellectual growth doesn't always feel easy, and he defended high standards for all students, not just some. What I find really interesting is his connection between rigor and democracy. Bagley believed that access to serious academic knowledge is what allows citizens to participate fully in society. He believed that lowering standards in the name of access may feel compassionate, but it may limit long-term opportunity. And that idea still resonates. If we take essentialism seriously, it shapes how instruction should be designed. It prioritizes foundational knowledge and sequencing learning really carefully, balancing conceptual understanding with fluency. The Common Core State Standards Initiative is a great example of this. For example, in mathematics, this means protecting time and making sure major cluster standards are taught. And they are taught deeply and not just so that we can move through the content quickly. So this might look like making sure that you have a lot of time practicing proportional reasoning or algebraic thinking and core number sense. And it means making sure that we're not rushing through to cover more material, but building a deep, solid foundational understanding of which further grade levels can build upon. And this design is really intentional. It reflects a belief that structure supports students rather than restricting them. Essentialism's strengths are clear: protecting rigorous instruction, promoting coherence of foundational knowledge across grade levels, and clarifying priorities. Sometimes that looks like priorities of standards, like major clusters versus additional or supporting standards. But there are some challenges. Sometimes a essentialist classroom can be overly rigid, or maybe an implied rigidity. Um, Sometimes it seems like student voice is undervalued, and sometimes a essentialist classroom can become maybe a bit inflexible. However, the key is really implementation. Essentialism should anchor instruction. It shouldn't silence student creativity. For me, the strengths outweigh the challenges, especially when we remember that structure and support can coexist in a thinking classroom. Reflection really brings this back to us. Are we preserving that essential knowledge? Are we pairing rigor with support? Are we ensuring access, not just exposure? In a time where we're constantly reforming, constantly changing instruction or to meet the needs and bring up test scores, essentialism actually offers steadiness. It doesn't resist innovation, but it asks whether innovation strengthens or weakens the foundational learning. And I think that that's what feels really important about essentialism. Essentialism still matters in education today. Everything really feels so important and priorities blur, and students carry unfinished foundations from year to year. And sometimes innovation moves so quickly, sometimes faster than the students building some coherence across a grade level or across multiple grade levels. And essentialism really provides a clarity for student understanding, and it helps teachers to focus on what has to be taught, what are the things that students must master before we move on. And it really helps build students' confidence when they find that mastery. In disciplines like math, coherence really isn't optional, it's essential. Essentialism really asks something of us as educators. It asks us to be clear about what is essential for our students to know and be able to do. We can't be vague. It asks us to protect foundational knowledge. Sometimes students need to have a certain level of algebraic thinking or number sense. And it holds us to a high expectation of all students, but we have to be providing support and scaffolds for those students to reach that mastery. But really, it's teaching with structure and purpose of well-planned lessons meant for every student to succeed. This concludes my presentation on essentialism. These are my references, including our textbook, Philosophy of Education and Action, and I did pull in a little bit from the California Math Framework. Thank you.